It's Second Helping on the Belly Up Podcast Network. Travis Reier, Senior Analyst for BamaOnLine.com, part of the On3 Network, alongside my great friend and co-host, Brent Beaird, longtime college football analyst for First Coast News down in Jacksonville, Florida. Also, Brent Beaird, a voter. Well, you talk about an interesting Heisman Trophy race.
Really?
Brent has one of those votes for the most prestigious honor in all of collegiate athletics, the Heisman Trophy. Brent, we've got a lot of games to talk about this week involving SEC teams, but we got to start, right, with the coaching carousel cranking up. Used to take a little bit deeper into the season, at least, it seemed like anyway. Now you've got Texas A&M making the move on Jimbo Fisher. Mississippi State goes ahead and decides to end the Zach Arnett experiment, really, is what that felt like. Less than a year into it. Your thoughts as we head into, again, a busy slate of games, but more than anything, coaching changes taking over headlines.
And they will continue. And we still don't quite know, do we, Trav, what's going to happen at Arkansas? With Sam Pittman is a possibility, not saying he's going to lose his job, but we've got that too. Jimbo, certainly not a surprise, although I'd heard that they were considering keeping him because of the Texas situation to keep the roster intact. That's going to be a fascinating job to see who gets that. I mean, we've heard everything from the ridiculous to the sublime, and Lane Kiffin and Mike Elko and Mike Norvell, and Dan Lanning said definitely no. Jeff Traylor, Kalen DeBoer from Washington, Traylor is from UTSA. So no doubt Jimbo got one of the greatest deals in the history of mankind, in that even if he takes a job, he still gets his full pay, which is amazing, frankly. And I guess when we take this one at a time real quick, but Trav, Jimbo really never got it done, did he, for what they thought he would do? I think his offense got stale. And, you know, the humbling thing for him is he probably not going to get another A&M job anytime soon. You know, my question asking out loud is, I really wonder what he's going to do next. I mean, a lot of people think he'll sit on the ranch and collect his money, but you know, and I know these guys want to coach, and will he take a coordinator job somewhere, maybe, Trav, for a couple of years just to get going again?
Could be, but as you've outlined here in the opening, doesn't need to be in a hurry. I think he's also got a son who is going to play college football at Samford coming up here in the next year or so. So maybe he wants to enjoy that aspect of things, of being a dad. But you're right, football coaches typically don't stray too far from the game. I think for Jimbo too, he's also at a point in his career in terms of how attractive he is as a candidate at, say, a Power 5 type situation. Maybe there's still that on the table for him in the not too distant future, but it would seem like, sort of like we saw with a previous Texas A&M coach, right? Dennis Franchione,
Yes.
Guys like that, when they run through that cycle and they hit their zenith of popularity, or in terms of income potential, it is a pretty good step back a lot of times. It's to a Texas State or a North Texas, or a program of that level. But we'll see. Jimbo's a good football coach. I don't think there's much doubt about that. I do think, as you alluded to there, a little bit outdated in some concepts when it comes to offensive football. Not so much even just personnel groupings or the usage of tight ends and two backs and things like that, but not much in the way of tempo, not much in the way of pre-snap movement or eye candy or those type of things that have become such a big part of the college game these days. So it'll be interesting if he does take another swing at it, even as a coordinator. I think he's going to have to show that, he's willing to sort of step it up. And that's where the Petrino marriage maybe was not as impactful as some folks thought it would be, because Petrino too shares a lot of those same beliefs as we get more and more into this new era of college football. So, I think for both those guys, it could be difficult moving forward. But Zach Arnett, you kind of touched on this last week, the potential for some movement at Mississippi State. Boy, what a Saturday night in College Station, too.
Really?
Jimbo wins the game 51-10, gets fired. Zach Arnett, it would seem less surprisingly, loses the game by 41 points, gets fired. That wasn't the place to be for head coaches last Saturday night at Kyle Field, apparently. So with Mississippi State, the wish list, there's been talk about Dan Mullen maybe reuniting with State. That seems to have been ratcheted down here a little bit, maybe in the last day or two. So I think you're thinking more along the lines of some realistic options from the group of five looking to take a step up, maybe a hot coordinator somewhere, Brent.
Jamie Chadwell from Liberty, Lance Leopold from Kansas, who's done a great job, as is Willie Fritz of Tulane. John Sumrall of Troy is a shining star. Rhett Lashley from SMU. Now, Mullen, his name's been mentioned, but again, if you don't like a recruit and he doesn't, at some point that gets to you. Now, you told me years ago, and I thought about this, when you take a job, the last thing you need to do is, unless you're a Steve Spurrier type, is particularly if you are promoted from D coordinator to head coach, you don't fire a lot of people, A, and B, you don't change the offense. And unfortunately, Zach Arnett did both. Now, he's a really good D coordinator, but Travis, obvious he wasn't ready for that job, and getting rid of a lot of that personnel. You've got one of the better quarterbacks in the league in Will Rogers, and he was just lost in that offense. So, point well taken. When you first start, probably the minimal amount of changes you make sometimes are better.
Yeah, we talked about this going into the season with the understanding that State had pretty much scrapped the air raid.
Yes.
In that if you're going to make that type of move away from what you have recruited to over the previous 2 or 3 years, this Mississippi State offense with Will Rogers at quarterback, with the way it had built its offensive line, it was built for the air raid. And of course, the unfortunate, tragic, untimely passing of Mike Leach changed everything. But in Zach Arnett's case, you don't have the cachet. I made the analogy back in the preseason to Alabama, and this is going way back, but it's what struck a chord with me. Alabama in 1989 going from Bill Curry and Homer Smith's offense to Gene Stallings in 1990. And Gene wasn't about tricking you or being innovative on offense. It was bludgeoning ball. It was, you talk about joyless murder ball, like we've seen under Nick Saban in some years at Alabama. That was pretty much Gene Stallings' approach. Mash you offensively with the run game, stymie you with a dominant defense, and win the kicking game. That's what it was about. So when Gene Stallings got off to an 0-3 start in 1990, he still was afforded the opportunity, and I think Zach Arnett tried to maintain this during the course of this season to continue to instill and implement the program, big picture wise, that he thought needed to be there. And he ultimately proved to be right. Now, also in 1990, we saw Alabama improve over the course of that season, upset a top 5 team in Tennessee on the road, beat Auburn to cap that regular season, got blasted by Louisville in the Fiesta Bowl, but still the message had been sent that the change in culture, the change in approach was beginning to take hold. We just didn't see that with Zach Arnett over the course of this season. Now, look, State had some injuries I think you definitely have to take that into account, starting with Will Rogers.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, especially in today's game, you just aren't afforded that 2 or 3 year sort of grace period to get it going with the way you want to play football.
And the other problem that state has, Travis, and Arkansas does too. Now, this will end next year, but for the moment, they are still in the SEC West, which will never be a picnic for any coach.
No. And look, even with the divisions going away, when you're adding Texas and Oklahoma, it's going to be even tougher than it was with divisions. Yes. So there is no break on the horizon for programs like Mississippi State, who I guess still, because of the ruling here in the last day or so, the continued rulings, I guess, where transitioning programs like Jacksonville State and also James Madison are concerned in terms of bowl eligibility. They're not eligible and continue not to be, which I think is asinine. If you're a Division I program, why do you have to wait out bowl eligibility?
Really?
I guess State could still qualify. There's teams out there that could qualify for bowls as 5 and 7 teams. I mean, we got so many games these days, and you need teams. So we'll see. There are a lot of things to consider with that Mississippi State. I think Summerall, if that's a guy you can get, he strikes me as a stabilizing presence.
Yes, absolutely.
That could help Kentucky. He previously of Kentucky before he went to Troy, could really do some pretty good things there at Mississippi State. Brent, we've got a pretty much full slate of games. We got one team on a bye this week in the SEC. Is that what it is?
Vanderbilt, yes.
Vanderbilt, yeah. That's why I wouldn't remember. So we will review as we preview. Typically the case here on Second Helping. We will do that once again this week as the Alabama Crimson Tide in that noon Eastern window on Saturday gets an FCS opponent in the Mocs of Chattanooga. UTC 7-3 overall, 6-2 in that Southern Conference. Alabama, of course, coming off its latest impressive performance, a 49-21 win over Kentucky up in the Commonwealth. Jalen Milroe continues, Brent, to be a touchdown machine. Alabama had a couple turnovers in that game, but you really wouldn't know it based on the dominance that the Crimson Tide enjoyed over Mark Stoops' team last Saturday.
I thought that was a real character win for Alabama. They had the chance, frankly, after the LSU win, the game starts at 11 Central Time. We'll just wake up about 12 or 12:30. But, boy, they were ready to go. And, frankly, that game, for all intents and purposes, was almost over at the end of the first quarter. Milroe was very efficient. Since halftime of the Tennessee game, Bama scored on 17 of 25 non-garbage time possession. So that has been really incredible. One thing I want you to talk about a little bit is Jayden Roberts and what he has done for that offensive line. I think he's called Swamp Monster, if I got the nickname right. But it's still, this team has really turned it up on both sides of the ball. Still need to figure out what to do about Kool-Aid McKinstry and returning punts and things of that nature. But a very sharp, efficient performance, Trav, for the Tide.
Yeah, it came out and didn't waste a lot of time. It was a Kentucky crowd that, was semi into it, I would say, especially with Kentucky coming off the win the previous week on the road at Mississippi State. But Alabama did exactly what it needed to do on the road. You said it, efficiency continues to be a friend of the Alabama offense. You mentioned that 17 of 25 stat. That also applies to the last two games for Alabama on third downs. And so sustaining drives, opening the game with 3 third down conversions, including one for the touchdown to Amari Niblack. So it's an Alabama team very much trending in the right direction. And now it gets a chance to rest and recover, you would think, on Saturday in that matchup with Chattanooga before you get into that gauntlet of Auburn on the road. And now, as we know for sure, Crimson Tide and Dawgs once again in Atlanta.
Real quick, Trav, a lot of folks have talked about Jayden Roberts and the job that he's done on the offensive line. I'm sure you've wrote about that. I'm not saying he's Superman, but sometimes you just find a piece that you didn't have before that makes a difference.
Sometimes it takes a couple of injuries, and that's really what it took. Darian Dalcourt goes out. Terrence Ferguson goes out. And now you get to essentially your fourth option at guard behind Tyler Booker and the two aforementioned options that we had seen pre-Jayden Roberts. But he has been a revelation, Jayden Roberts, no doubt about it. Physical guy. And this is a guy who's been around, right? So he's not some newcomer or a first or second year player. This is a guy who qualifies pretty much at this point for upperclassman status. In his development, he's made good use of his time. When his opportunity presented itself, again, he plays with power. He plays with an edge. He's always looking for work. He has also helped them not just in the run game, but in pass pro too.
Yeah.
Because they were getting pushed around on the nose of the pocket a good bit earlier in the season. And I know a lot of folks wanted to see Jalen Milroe navigate the pocket better, but I think there were times where Jalen felt like, I'm getting pushed up into my face. I don't really feel like I have an option other than to go out the back door or drift left or, those kind of things. But what you're seeing now with Booker at one guard, Roberts at the other, they're firming up that pocket. And you're seeing Jalen, I think, more confident about stepping up in there and then either making throws down the field or at times hurting defenses with his legs. Also in that noon Eastern window on Saturday. By the way, both these games that we're starting with, SEC Network Plus, ESPN Network Plus. So you're gonna have to navigate that app.
Oh,
fans of Alabama, Mississippi State, a Zach Arnett-less Mississippi State team welcomes in-state foe Southern Miss to Starkville on Saturday for an early kickoff. It'll be interesting if Will Rogers is good to go at the quarterback position. Again, this is a state team that's had injuries. Southern Miss has had certainly its ups and downs this season at 3-7 and 2-5 in the Sun Belt, but kind of lost in all of this with the Arnett news is, again, the potential at least is there for State to win this week, maybe do the unthinkable in the Egg Bowl, get a win over Ole Miss, and secure bowl eligibility. I don't think it's going to happen, but mathematically it's still a possibility.
Yeah, it really is. And a matter of fact, in that game last week with A&M, Trav, we had a quarterback battle by the end of the game of Chris Parson and Jalen Henderson. Those are names that people aren't really familiar with, but by the time you get around to the injuries that some of these teams have got, that's where they do too. And listen, not only has Rogers been hurt, but Trav, how much has Woody Marks been hurt? Excuse the double hurts there, but how much has that hurt Mississippi State?
It is hurt, and it was a concern of mine going into the season with the shift to more of a load being placed on Woody Marks in terms of the run game and how would he hold up in that regard, and really just running back depth in general for the Bulldogs. But it was going to take an alignment of stars really for this State offense in transitioning away from the air raid to what Zach Arnett wanted more of under his regime to maximize its potential in year one of that scheme. And it certainly required healthy Will Rogers and Woody Marks. Neither of those things happened during the course of this season, and as a result, we're kind of seeing what we see. What you don't want to see, though, over the remainder of this season, because I think State really likes the potential of Chris Parson, is for him to sustain sort of regression. As a result of maybe being thrown into this thing too soon and also just in a situation where there's not a lot of positivity in general right now. So you don't want to lose potentially your future quarterback in what is essentially a lost season otherwise. So, yeah, we'll see if State can get it done at home and at least provide maybe a little bit of intrigue where that Egg Bowl is concerned. What is that? That's Thanksgiving night, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So 1 week from tonight, we get State and Ole Miss in the Egg Bowl. Also in that noon Eastern time slot. I wonder how SEC Network goes about picking from those 3 or 4 games. I guess it may have come down to more Mississippi State, Southern Miss quality of the opponent, but
Could be.
SEC Network noon Eastern Saturday. UL Monroe 2-8 and overall and 0-7 in the Sun Belt travels to Oxford where Ole Miss needs a much needed respite after being thrashed by the now top ranked Georgia Bulldogs. Hey, Lane had a little something for
He
Kirby
did.
and UGA
He did.
during the early stages of that game at Sanford Stadium. Pulled out a little fake punt as well, but
Yeah.
ultimately, I think as we both sort of suspected, it comes down to roster and more specifically Georgia's offensive line against that Ole Miss defensive line and the ability to just really control the game. And ultimately, Georgia just too much for the Rebels, who still, 8-2, 5-2 in the SEC, 10 wins right there on the table still for
Well,
Lane Kiffin.
oh yeah, and New Year's Six bowl game possibly. That would say a lot for them. Double digit wins, and he would have that Trav in 2 out of 3 years. That'd be rather impressive for Lane with that. But in talking to one of the Ole Miss radio crew this week, he made an interesting point. He said Lane is growing up somewhat, and you kind of saw it after this game. There wasn't any blaming the players. He basically said, we've got to recruit better. And Georgia often is a litmus test with a lot of teams, and he was very honest about that. But I think the point is, and I give Lane a lot of credit for this. I'm not saying that they were going to win the division every year, but Trev, they've made it to a point to where they're close to winning double-digit games. I know they struggle against elite teams, and everybody does. Your point's a good one that they played really well early against Georgia. The problem is they only got 3 points on their last 8 possessions. So my question here is, Lane is getting to that point, and I hope he doesn't necessarily plateau. And is this as good as it's going to get with Ole Miss vying for a New Year's Six? So give him credit for that and reaching this level. I'm just really curious, Trav, is where do they go from here?
Yeah, and where does Lane maybe go from here?
Yeah, yes.
Because he's been linked to that Texas A&M opening. Not sure he's going to be a viable candidate for that gig, but no pun intended. But you got to think there are some openings that are going to reveal themselves where he could be in the mix. I think it's a great fit right now for both he and Ole Miss. I think Ole Miss, if it continues to operate in the portal like it has a great chance to be a consistent, even with Oklahoma and Texas coming in the league, at least an 8-win team, in that scenario, because Lane is going to work that portal on the offensive side that is almost going to ensure 7, 8, 9 wins a season. Absolutely. Now, defensively, I think it's going to always be an issue. But I think Pete Golding as a coordinator in that situation probably can do some of his best work. So, yeah, I think it's a great fit right now. Ole Miss wins 10 games, gets to a New Year's Six. That's the ceiling right now for Ole Miss football.
It is.
It is. And it's going to be the ceiling moving forward with a new SEC on the way. Speaking of Texas teams, Texas A&M going to host Abilene Christian in that noon Eastern window on Saturday. Another SEC Network Plus, ESPN Plus game. You just wonder about A&M's psyche right now, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll say this for Jaylen Henderson. We talk about him as the third guy to take snaps, I guess, for A&M at the quarterback position this season, but throws for 150 in the win over Mississippi State with a couple of touchdowns, runs for another 60 with a couple more touchdowns. Pretty good stuff from Jaylen Henderson behind center for A&M in that win over State last Saturday night. And, look, A&M's bowl eligible, so it'll be interesting to see how this team kind of finishes things out, especially with a trip to LSU on the not too distant horizon.
Well, and my question with this, Trav, looking ahead a little bit, is if you're taking over that job, and aren't you in pretty good shape at quarterback? In that quarterback room, I mean, obviously, Wigman, Johnson. I know some of these guys may move along, either to the next level or to another school. And then with Henderson, listen, whoever takes that job over, there's certainly not going to be any lack of talent, particularly if they keep that front seven and defense together for next year.
Yeah, it'll be interesting based on the coaching change, how their roster is impacted. So much has been made about how A&M has utilized NIL to assemble its current roster. Well, NIL might help A&M keep a lot of that together.
Sure might.
If guys have got deals or have setups that have them in a really good place, are they really going to be that tempted to sort of hit the market to see what they can pick up elsewhere? It's just one of those new questions that we don't know the answer to at this point in all of this. So roster will be interesting. You're right. I think quarterback should be fine. Weigman's going to be coming off that injury. He's also a really good baseball player too. Mm-hmm. So how does that play into his future maybe as well? A&M, look, Oklahoma, Texas in the league. A&M, we talk about Ole Miss's ceiling. Ole Miss's ceiling should be the floor for Texas A&M. It should be. Yeah. But in my lifetime, it's been more along the lines of Ole Miss's ceiling. So
absolutely,
we need to see it, I guess, at some point before we can believe it. 3:30 Eastern on CBS Saturday from Knoxville. The Georgia Bulldogs traveling to Neyland Stadium to take on the Vols. Boy, Tennessee limping back home after Eli Drinkwitz. Eli enjoyed that one too, by the way, in case you were wondering.
Did he?
Eli enjoyed that drubbing of the Tennessee Vols last week, Brent.
Hey, Trav, he basically said he owns the state of Tennessee now, doesn't he?
State champs, and then at the handshake, he tells Josh Heupel, we stand on business, Josh. Now look, Drink kind of scurried away quickly after talking trash. He didn't exactly hang in there on the handshake to see if there was going to be any response from big Josh Heupel, but it was entertaining nonetheless. And that's more of the stuff we need in the SEC, to be honest with you, because look, Missouri year in and year out isn't going to be this Missouri in all likelihood. Hell of a season. Great season. Like Ole Miss. Very much New Year's Six relevant at this point. That's not going to happen year in and year out. But if guys like Eli Drinkwitz are at places like Missouri with their personalities and, what they can offer from that standpoint, hey, it makes it better, I think, in the league. We've got plenty of milquetoast. In the league right now. Need a few more Eli's. A lane isn't a bad thing. These sort of mid-level to lower level programs in the SEC, keep them entertaining if nothing else. And look, Missouri is a really, really good football team.
They really are. Maybe we thought they could be where they are with Brady Cook, Schrader. Schrader's as tough as they come, and I'm really impressed with him and the things that he has done. Also, and while we're talking about Missouri real quick, Travis, in SEC Media Days, Drink said, I'm done with the offense. I need to get somebody else in here and run it. And that, sometimes coaches need to stay with doing what they're doing and what they're known for. But boy, him giving that up made a huge difference in that team, didn't it?
It did. It did. And, the defensive coordinator hire he made a couple of years ago
Yes.
didn't hurt either. I mean, did a number on that Tennessee offense
really
last Saturday. So the stakes obviously for Tennessee go up even more so this week with Georgia visiting. Georgia just surging like in taking Ole Miss apart over the course of 4 quarters. Carson Beck, as quietly as you possibly can probably, has thrown for over 3,000 yards this season, and it doesn't get talked about enough. It's really some unheralded types on that Georgia offense, Dejon Edwards at the running back position, that have really stepped forward to help Georgia sustain its success on offense. And now here comes Brock Bowers back, probably a couple weeks earlier from that ankle injury, Brent, than anybody anticipated.
And was effective too. To me, the thing that really sums them up are 2 things really as examples. Jamon Dumas Johnson, he's a starter. He's out for the year on the defensive side of the ball. Well, they replace him with a freshman in C.J. Allen, and Allen ends up with his first career sack and 9 tackles. And then the guy that we thought would eventually be really good, it took him a while to settle in with this team, is Dom Lovett, who is stepping up. So, Trev, Georgia is Alabama-like, and the fact of, someone goes down, not only do they step up, but they step up and have a quality performance too.
They do. They absolutely do. And when you look at this game Saturday afternoon in Knoxville from the Tennessee side of things, going to need more than 45, 50 rushing yards from those 3 running backs.
Really?
Joe Milton led Tennessee in rushing against Missouri last Saturday with 36 yards. The backs, Jalen Wright, Jabari Small, Dylan Sampson, got to get more out of those guys in this game. You can't just expect Joe Milton and what that current receiving core consists of to carry you against a Georgia team. You got to maintain, you got to establish at least the threat of the run, or it's going to be a long afternoon for the Vols on their home field. And like most teams, when we talk about games involving Georgia and Alabama too, still, the faster start you obviously can get off to, obviously, the better, especially for a Tennessee team that seems to be on the descent right now, and you're playing at home. And those fans went into this season thinking that this program was going to take another step forward. If nothing else, need to be competitive in this game against Georgia, not get kind of smoked, for lack of a better way of putting it. 4:00 Eastern on SEC Network Saturday. Auburn, talk about ascending teams, hosting the Aggies of New Mexico State. I didn't know this. New Mexico State, am I reading this right, is 8-3?
Yes.
On the season?
Yes.
One of those losses, by the way, to our Rainbow Warriors of Hawaii. So we like to note that. But, I guess I got to ask you, Auburn at 6-4, bowl eligible in year 1 under Hugh Freeze. Knowing what we know now about some of the competition that Auburn has faced in this last 3 or 4 weeks, are you buying into legitimate improvement by this AU team, or do you think it's had more to do with the teams, the schedule lightening up for them a little bit, or do you think it's a combination of both?
I think it's probably a combination of both. Mississippi State, Vandy, Arkansas, who really laid an egg, frankly. They could win 7 games which for Hugh Freeze in his first year, I think several things happened here. They finally settled down on quarterback, and Thorne has really done a pretty good job. We thought they'd be good defensively, and they really have been. Hugh decided early on they had to do something with the line of scrimmage, and something you mentioned last week, Jarquez Hunter.
He's rubber stamping 100-yard games now.
Yeah. He's finally gotten into to doing and playing the way he needs to play. And guys like Jalen McLeod, who had 3 sacks, is really able to come into his own. But I'm just telling you, Trav, this New Mexico State team, Jerry Kill is a coach, and he's familiar. Help me on this, Trav. I think it's epilepsy, right? What Kill has, and when he first got it, it really took him off the sidelines for a while. But he's learned to be able to live with it, and not only live with it. My Stars, if you go to New Mexico State and you win 8 games, I mean, that's like winning a conference championship and winning double-digit games in some places. Trav, would it surprise you at all if they give Auburn more trouble than Arkansas did?
It still might, but more so than anything, if that happens, I would think it has more to do with Auburn's mindset and this game being between the road trip to Arkansas and the Iron Bowl.
Yes.
Maybe it plays out that way, but you're right. I do think Auburn has found a groove on the offensive side. That defense continues to play at a nice level as well. KJ Jefferson, just 116 passing yards last week, and just a early knockout punch from the Tigers against an Arkansas team like we were talking about with some teams earlier, like Kentucky coming off a road win. You feel like maybe this team is starting to rebound here in November, but not the case for the Arkansas. Auburn did what it needed to do in getting out to that, 48-3 it was after 3 quarters.
Yeah, really.
We can talk about whether or not the schedule has something to do with Auburn's success of late. I think that can be true, but when you go on the road and take apart a team in Arkansas like Auburn did, that tells me there's legitimate improvement. There's no doubt about that. So, should be a win for Auburn. And then you start looking ahead to maybe an opportunity to win 8 games if you knock off Alabama in the Iron Bowl. In the primetime window on Saturday night, FIU travels to those Arkansas Razorbacks. FIU 4-6, 1-6 in Conference USA. Arkansas now, after the loss to Auburn, 3-7, just 1-6 in the SEC. And just as quick as we thought Sam Pittman was safe after that improbable win at Florida, now we wonder if he's not so safe. Although, the word that seems to continue to come out of Fayetteville is that as it sits right now, there's a good chance Sam Pittman could still be back next season. Now, you lose a game like this, and I think everything is on the table. If you lose to FIU and you still got Missouri coming up Thanksgiving week, I'd say Pittman needs this game on Saturday. And then, Missouri could kind of go away from you and still be okay.
Yeah, I agree that but they lost a lot of momentum they had from beating Florida with that loss to Auburn. I don't know if you've seen this or not, but what doesn't help in times like this is when you've got 2 bizarre incidents going on. The former offensive coordinator, Dan Enos, after one of the losses, for whatever reason, started emailing students who were
he was responding to a student who sent him some emails after, I guess, maybe the Texas A&M game.
And just exacerbated the situation. And another thing that happened, over the they go into the to the locker room, and you've got some of the red shirts or or watching Polar Express. And Pittman said, I didn't know that was going on, and in fairness, he may not have, but Trav, when you're struggling like they are, incidents like that just stick out like a sore thumb, don't they?
Yeah, those are the questions you end up having to answer in a season like this. And my understanding is it's an entirely separate locker room from the part of the roster that's really integrated into the plan that are literally playing in the game. It was a locker room of guys that you just let dress. They're not going to play in all likelihood, but you still have that type of situation you have to deal with. It's been that kind of year for Sam Pittman. Also in primetime Saturday night, talk about a team that needs a win and going to have to get it in a very tough spot. Florida travels to Missouri. Missouri at 8-2 now, 4-2 in the SEC after that thumping of Tennessee last Saturday. Florida got Jayden Daniels, and as a Heisman Trophy voter, I'm going to ask you more about that when we talk about LSU and Georgia State coming up in just a little bit. But boy, not an easy turnaround for that Gators defense specifically, and not a trip in the park for the offense either. But Florida, as we sort of outlined a couple weeks ago, heading into that Arkansas game, the urgency that needed to be there to get that win at home, to get the 6 wins, because we knew LSU was coming up on the road. We knew Missouri was coming up on the road. And oh, by the way, you cap the regular season with a home date against a top 5 team in Florida State.
I don't know anybody who's had a tougher last few games than Florida with LSU, Missouri, and Florida State. That's going to be really tough, and it's going to be really tough to be on the road. Florida really needs a concerted effort by everybody, but right now, and I really still like Austin Armstrong, but their defense has had a lot of injuries, and their defense has failed them in a lot of ways. I mean, losing Shamir James hurt them, one of their better defensive players, and they've also had some Austin Barber's questionable now. Damian George may end up covering for him. But Travis, here's the reality for this too, and I hear it every day like you do with us living here in North Florida, is can Billy Napier get it done? And again, they're not going to fire him. That's not going to happen. Now, if this is going on a year from now, it may be a different conversation. But the concern now is, can they, and I think they are playing hard. They just don't have the, either the personnel or the personnel doesn't have the experience, what they need. Now, they do need a special teams coordinator. They need an offensive coordinator at some point too. But, and I'm sure Pops has given you some interesting replies to these things, but they're beginning now to lose some of that recruiting class. They were at 3, they're now at 6, and Trav, that they've got to stop the bleeding there quickly.
That is where Napier could take the biggest hit, because what Florida fans are sort of bracing themselves with right now is still the program builder label and tag that Napier came to Florida with. And it has been showing up in terms of earlier recruiting for Florida for the 2024 cycle. But as you said, as of late, been losing some of that recruiting class. So definitely needs to stabilize things on the trail, get this thing to the early signing date. Remember, you don't have to get it to February anymore.
That's right.
You only got about a month until you can get these guys signed, and make sure you're well within that top 10. Because whatever you think of recruiting rankings, they matter with fan bases. And so if this thing slides outside of the top 10, then the perception of the big picture for Billy Napier takes on more of a hit. And in that game against LSU, I thought Florida would score in the mid-30s. They did.
Yeah.
But they gave up 52.
Mm-hmm.
And again, Jayden Daniels was pretty much a one-man wrecking crew. I think Missouri, the problem for Florida this week is Missouri's motivated. I think people
really
look
are.
at Missouri and think, Georgia wrapped up the East, and what Missouri's playing for a New Year's Six. Missouri's playing for a top 10 ranking.
Mm-hmm.
There's still plenty for that team to play for. And guys, here's the thing. Guys like Cody Schrader, they don't need to be motivated. They're going to play at a high level regardless. That guy's difficult to tackle regardless of the situation. And that looks to be a tough ask for Florida on the road this week. Also at 7:30 Eastern, this one on the SEC Network, Kentucky looking to pick up its 7th win of the season. South Carolina still with an outside shot at 6 wins, Brent. Carolina picked up its 2nd SEC win last week. Kentucky looking to pick up another SEC road win after falling at home to Alabama a week ago. I guess for Kentucky, you're talking about bowl pecking order here.
Yeah.
And for Carolina, you're talking about, again, the outside shot at a non-losing season.
Well, I still give Stoops a lot of credit at Kentucky as far as what they, I think, consistently do. This is a, 7, 8, 9 win team, which speaks well, frankly, of Stoops. Now, they have struggled, obviously, against the better teams in the league, and everybody's going to be able to do that. But they did not, Trev, they have not gotten out of Devin Leary what they thought they would. He has not been real consistent. You certainly saw that last week in the Alabama game. Not saying he's a bad quarterback, but they thought he would set the woods on fire, and that has not happened. The opposite has happened at Carolina, in that Spencer Rattler has been consistent, and at times he's been a star. But the problem in Carolina is, particularly on the defensive side of the ball, Trav, that they don't have much around Spencer Rattler to help. So, frankly, to your point, people don't think this game matters, but I can tell you, to these fan bases, it certainly matters.
Yeah, I think that Spencer Rattler has been criminally undervalued.
Mm-hmm.
Not just last season, because at the end of last season, that November he had was memorable. Will never be forgotten by South Carolina fans.
Mm-hmm.
To get those wins over Tennessee and Clemson down the stretch of the 2022 season, those are all-time performances. And I think he's been really good this season too. But as you said, other than Xavier Legette, there's just not a lot around this guy.
No.
Dak Joyner, I guess, but I've said it before. I look at some of these quarterbacks that we're going to hear their names called in the 2024 NFL draft that are going to go ahead of Spencer Rattler in all likelihood. I think Spencer Rattler is going to have a better career than a lot of those guys at the next level. As for Devin Leary, watching Kentucky intently against Alabama, that offense is still, as much as you want to talk about the quarterback, it's still about tight ends and running backs with Liam Cohen and his NFL background. So with that, it's play action oriented. And I just don't know if that's Devin Leary's thing. I call Devin Leary the Sam Hartman of the SEC. And the reason why is I think Sam Hartman experienced some of the same things in going from Wake Forest to Notre Dame.
Yeah.
And you look at Notre Dame's record, and you look at Sam Hartman's performance. I don't think it's been over the course of the season what people thought it would be with him making that move. So I think there's similar guys. I think for Kentucky, it always will go back to effectiveness, running the football first and foremost. And that's why I think Ray Davis will rebound this week against South Carolina and probably have a pretty big game. And that'll help Devin Leary because Alabama wasn't going to let Ray Davis beat him last week. And once you take care of Davis, you don't have to worry about Leary beating you with his legs.
True.
So then you can pin your ears back in your pass rush and really get after Leary when he goes to throw the football. 8 Eastern on ESPN2 Saturday night, late night with the Tigers. You want to talk about the Jayden Daniels effect? This game is actually going to air on ESPN2. And I'm
amazing.
a Sean Elliott fan, head coach at Georgia State. And the Panthers are 6-4 overall. So, legitimate record, legitimate group of 5 type team, Division I team, I guess. And so LSU at home with Jayden Daniels going to take on Georgia State. And I'm going to ask you, because you are a Heisman Trophy voter, I'm not going to tell you to give me your vote and your pecking order, but I got to think Jayden Daniels has a spot on Brent Beaird's ballot right now.
Oh, I think he'd probably number one. And I think Michael Penix is up there also. And Brock Bowers have been healthy. He still could be that way, but yeah, it's just amazing. Trav, they averaged, I think it was 11 yards per play. And one of the more incredible stats I've ever seen in that Florida game. Well, think about this a minute. I'm sure you have and you've seen it. LSU ran 61 plays and they scored 52 points. Trav, how many times have we seen that?
Not often, but that's what you get when you look at Jayden Daniels and the number. That was a historic night.
It was.
Last Saturday night for Jayden Daniels. And you're talking about 372 passing yards, 234 on the ground. So between running it and throwing it, 606 yards produced by Jayden Daniels in that game against Florida. And look, the guy's must-see TV right now. And again, that's why a game in prime time against an opponent like Georgia State is going to be on ESPN2, not SEC Network, not SEC Network Plus, not ESPNU, but ESPN2 for the Tigers and the Panthers. So there you go. There's a rundown of this weekend's games. Brent, a lot to keep an eye on. And I guess there could be some intrigue. I like this slate a little bit better than some years because at least we do get a matchup like Georgia and Tennessee late. It seemed like in previous years, in our younger years, I guess you could say, Brent, this would be kind of the Tennessee Kentucky week, right? Before Tennessee Vanderbilt. So it was always kind of a sleepy week before rivalry weekend, but there's a chance Florida Missouri has a little pop in prime time. And again, not a slate that's going to keep you glued maybe throughout the day, but a couple of decent games.
Well, and think about this. This is not confirmed yet. It will be in December, but there's a chance one of the options from the 12-team playoff is going to be the games moving up. In other words, opening week will be the last Saturday in August. And Trav, the amazing thing is this weekend next year might be rivalry weekend, and Thanksgiving weekend looks like it's going to be championship weekend. Boy,
got to make room for that 12-team playoff.
Trav, talk about a difference in what people have been expecting in tradition. Boy, that would blow it out of the water, wouldn't it?
It would. And then, I think weather is going to become an interesting aspect of the expanded playoff. If we're going to have these, first round home games?
Yes.
For the higher seeds. Even this weekend, I was wondering a little bit. Looks like Knoxville is going to be perfect Saturday, though. Yeah. I think they're projecting sunny with a high of 60. Mm-hmm. So that's glorious. Absolutely glorious football weather. But some of these home games in the future in the CFP, they could be interesting from a weather perspective, especially when you get maybe an SEC team going to Ann Arbor or something like that. snow game potential could be in effect when we get to that point. But we got a lot of football to play, a lot of football to watch between now and then. Brent, as always, great stuff. Anything else before we get out of here?
Yeah, I'll end with this, Trav. I know it's out of conference games, but boy, these two games going to have a lot to do with where the playoffs are. Washington at Oregon State, Texas at Iowa State. Boy, oh boy, Texas at number 7, Washington at number 5, in a SEC team like Alabama. If things go well on Saturday, that could help them tremendously, couldn't it?
I've said it all week. Washington goes down in Corvallis this weekend.
Yeah, could be.
My guy Jonathan Smith can coach football.
He can he?
And I think Oregon State gets it done against Washington. Washington has had the look of a team just waiting to get beat here for the last couple of 3 weeks. So I think it happens.
Yes.
I think it happens in Corvallis. We'll see. All right, Brent, we'll do it again next week.
Good. Can't wait, bud. Thanks much. Take care.
For Brent Beaird, Travis Reier, thanking you once again for joining us right here on Second Helping on the Belly Up Podcast Network. Until next time, so long, everybody.